but I like for everybody to be able to access that. Emission Systems Test 9, and this is from Chapter 9 of our textbook. Enhanced IM emissions testing became required in all metro areas with a population of over 25,000. That is dead wrong. Some cities have got emissions testing, but the whole state doesn't have, you know. The IM 240 test is based on procedures the EPA had developed for certifying new vehicle emission compliance. That's true. The reason they call it IM 240 is it takes 240 seconds to do the test.
How long do you think it's going to take before emissions become irrelevant everywhere?
I don't know. I know they would like to do that, but I know there's a lot of resistance to it. I will tell you this, though, if it does happen, it'll mean more money for us. You know, because people have to get their cars fixed in.
Yeah, but
you know, just chop the catalytic converter off your car and drive through California and get stopped. You know, they'll drag that thing in and make you put a cap back on it. You know, you
be calling a mechanic quick as you can.
Yeah, I'm telling you. Well, I think what they do now is, if you don't pass, they make you spend up to $300 to try to make it compliant. And once you've spent $300, if it still needs more work, they'll go ahead and let you have a pass for another year. See what I'm saying? But they want you to keep it like it was. That's why a lot of people in California drive 65 Mustangs, because you just have to for that year. Yeah, they're not going to make you. I mean, if whatever was required for that year, you got to have a PCV valve. That's about it, you know, and all that. But
that's smart, though. I mean, because you could put any performance part on a Mustang and it'd still pass, basically, for that year, right?
Yeah, it would for that year. That year is all the they're not allowed to make you retrofit old cars and make
because they would ruin the collector value of them. So
well, no, it's not nothing to do with that. They don't care anything about that.
Yeah, well, yeah, the reason they were trying to be fair, basically saying, I think there's probably some kind of a statute somewhere that says, they can't force you to retrofit an old car to make it, because that's not even practical.
No,
some of the engines just cannot meet, because of their very design, they can't meet new emission standards. That's one of the reasons they got away from, they changed some of the electronic diesel stuff because they had to add EGR, to meet new standards. And I got a chart on there somewhere on that, how they started out allowing you to have, it was on a graph, and they started out that you could have this much, and then it keeps going down, and it goes from, it's like the difference between the size of that screen up there and a postage stamp.
Sure.
That's how far down it went, what they were allowed. Number 3, as the law currently stands, the states are still required to meet air quality standards, but now can only meet those standards by offering basic or enhanced IM 240 testing. That's false. Number 4, tampering inspections may include looking at the gas cap, radiator, and exhaust system. That's false.
I'm going to say, why would they want to look at the gas cap?
Yeah. Number 5, the loaded mode test is classified as one of the that's not so either. Basically, an advantage of the advanced IM emissions test for the consumer is the fact that the repair of an emission problem can be taken care of at the testing center, so extra trips are not required. That's false. A lot of these questions are false. This next one is true, though. The name of the IM 240 test is taken from the fact that the driving cycle takes 240 seconds to complete. The actual drive cycle of the IM 240 test is similar to the first 2 hills of the FTP used by vehicle manufacturers, and that's true. So this emission stuff is just really, extremely, it's interesting if you're embroiled in it every day, but if you're just reading facts and figures, sometimes it makes you want to go into a snooze. A large engine during IM 240 test will always produce more emissions, since the volume being measured is more more than a small engine. So yeah, that's true too. And 10 is false. The drawback of the remote sensing testing for IM 240 being piloted in some states is the consumer has to go to a testing center a specific day and a time of test. That's false too. What they're trying to do, what they were talking about doing for OBD3, is having your vehicle would always have a network, basically, talking, and they'd have something like a phone booth or something that you drive by, or sort of a toll booth looking thing that you drive through that not really a toll. Have a transponder that your vehicle will be constantly broadcasting its diagnostic trouble codes and all this. And when you went by there, you know, it would not only broadcast that, but it broadcast the serial number of the car, and they'd know who owned the car, and they'd send you something in the mail or something and say, hey, you need to get your emissions straightened out.
What?
And if any of you guys have read my Digital Superman book, there was another possibility of what they would do there, in that this guy's driving this Lincoln, and he gets in a misfire code, and the Forgestar satellite picks up the fact that car, and is always watching them all, that car's got a misfire code. And so he's thinking, oh brother, now I got to get this thing. And the GPS goes, boom, boom. Now you're going to need to get this taken care of. Now here are a list of dealers that are close by, and you pick the one you want, we'll make you an appointment, you know, bing, like that. And so this woman in the write-up area is walking around with her notebook computer, and it says, okay, this car's coming in, and it'll be here in roughly 30 minutes to an hour, and it's got this kind of a code here, and this is the owner of the car, and all this kind of stuff, you know. And see, well, he comes in there and he's lost his wallet, and the lady that owns the car is a black lady who was actually his foster mother, but he's a white guy, and he's got a scar on the side of his neck, and he's a rough-looking guy, and he doesn't have any ID. So when he goes in there, they're thinking he stole the car, in spite of the fact that she loaned it to him. You know, it's an interesting set of circumstances, but the OBD3 system was what picked it up and made him go have it fixed. So you don't have a choice. You're going to have this fixed, or we're going to start charging you a fine. You know, I mean, that's a sort of a big brother thing, but that's where that OBD3 stuff's. They're trying to figure out a good way to go OBD3 so that basically the stuff that it will be pretty much automatic there. Clean Air Act was revised when? That was 1990. 1990. Basic or enhanced vehicle emissions testing programs were instituted depending on what? The severity of the area's air problem. Remember, Los Angeles used to have lots of smog.
Was it from the vehicles?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, the more vehicles they had for a long time, the worse it was in an area. As a matter of fact, somewhere in there in my office, I've got in early 1960s, 62 or 63, there's an old encyclopedia that, you know, we got rid of some of that stuff that at my in-laws' place after they passed away, but I pulled this one out because this woman was holding up this PCV valve, and the first car that ever got a PCV valve was the Corvair, and the PCV valve pretty much looked like PCV valves today, but what they were doing before that is they had a draft tube letting the crankcase blow by, just go out into the air. And in a big city, you would see these, you know, before they had traffic signals everywhere, they'd put a guy out here, you know, doing this, and how'd you like to do that all day, you know, over here, this, you know, just all day, every day. Sometimes the cops still do that if the lights are. But the point is, they showed a traffic cop out there rubbing his eyes because the emissions from those cars in that city were, you know, burning his eyes so bad. And that was the first one they addressed, was crankcase blow-by. And then what they do to make it happen, for handle that crankcase blow-by, was they'd have a draft tube coming out of the engine block, and if you know, driving down the road, it would have a cut like this right here, so that when the air was going past it, when you drive down the road, it would pull and it just go out here in the air, you know. That was a draft tube. That's what they call that.
Old spots on the parking spots.
Yeah, and you know, I think some of your Cummins diesels and Dodge pickups still have something similar to that. And the customers didn't like that oil that was always driven on the driveway, so a lot of them would rig up a plastic bottle under there to catch that oil. You know, just wire it in there and exactly have to empty it every so often. Okay, let me move on. Let me see, where are we at here? What question are we on? 13? 13? Centralized test facilities are test-only facilities as required by the original Clean Air Act. The reason they were not decentralized was to what? Eliminate conflicts of interest. What would be a conflict of interest?
Had to get it fixed.
If you're a test center and you also fix the car, you have a tendency to pad your wallet. Hey, we're not going to pass this unless you let us do X number of dollars worth of work. See?
Yeah.
So they were worried about that. Somebody obviously, when they passed in this Clean Air Act, brought it up. Now wait a minute, if we've got the same guys testing it, they're going to fix it. Won't they just police people? Like, okay, well these people can't do anything but test, and these other people, of course, if his brother-in-law is doing, you know, you technically could still have it. It's not a perfect system, but anyway, that's what they were concerned about. The inspection report issued at the end of the IM 240 test involves looking at two areas for each emission tested. What are the two areas that you're looking at? What about fail and reserve?
So
Fail and
answer
reserve.
2 and 13.
Huh?
See, all day, every day.
Now, if you got any extra questions about this that I'm not addressing, don't worry, it's all in the book. All right. The inspection report will be used by the technician to help diagnose what repairs need to be done on the vehicle. Technician should pay special attention to the vehicle blank load and the speed that occurred at the point of failure. In response to the Clean Air Act of 1990, the EPA mandated states to adopt what? IM 240. Yeah, we've been there. We're burning this in, basically. A special dynamometer is used during measuring of transient emissions, as the vehicle must simulate actual road conditions. Dynamometer. What is it? D-Y-N-A-M-O-M-E-T-E-R. Dynamometer. If you get it wrong, I'll have to check it off. All right. Hey, do you know the word? There was a word that was on my 6th grade spelling test that everybody had to spell, and it was anti-disestablishmentarianism. Was on the spelling test that I took in the 6th grade. Everybody had to spell that word right. Anti-disestablishmentarianism.
You spelled it right?
Yeah, I spelled it. I can spell it right now.
Spell it right now.
He's trying to. All you got to do is break it down. Anti-disestablishmentarianism. I mean, you figured out how to spell it. Ain't a big deal. Yeah. Many states require test vehicles undergo a what? Visual inspection. One of the things you'll see these guys doing is they got a mirror, kind of like the Secret Service uses whenever they're looking under the car to make sure there's no bombs under it, you know. And they walk around, they look under there and see if the exhaust has been tampered with and all. They just walk by with a big mirror and they're looking under there to see if all that's okay. I mean, that's what they do, you know. All right, number 19. Many states require test vehicles undergo a blank prior to being emissions tested. Visual inspection, 19 is the one I should have been on. Enhanced testing takes place through a what? Centralized network of state-run facilities. Okay, number 20. The IM 240 test procedure takes into account the volume of exhaust being produced and then calculates the mass of the emissions being produced. See, what's the difference between mass and volume, guys?
Mass is something more used for, I'd say, more solid.
Volume.
Like volume is what you'd be measuring, like a fluid, liquid, gas with. Seems like.
Mass is like.
If I've got a pint of air and a pint of water, it's the same volume, but there's more mass in that water.
Yeah.
So it's going to weigh more.
Yeah.
So mass is related.
Is like what it's made of in weight.
It's related to weight. That's what it amounts to.
Mass is like volume and weight times each other or something.
Yeah. But well, you remember what I told you? If you look at your gasoline by volume, it's 9,000 gallons of air to 1 gallon of gas. If you're going by volume, but if you go by weight, it's 14.7 to 1. See, that's what it is. You got one part fuel, 14.7 parts of air by weight. And I've told you this before. If I fill up my air tank out there, if I put 150 pounds of air in my air tank we air up tires with, does it weigh any more? A little bit. You can't hardly tell it. All right, 21. The test drive cycle includes acceleration, blank, and cruise modes. Deceleration. And they also include an engine off pressure test of the evaporative emission control system to check for fuel vapor leaks. That ain't complicated. Let's see, the next one. It pressurizes, what do they pressurize the system with? Nitrogen. We've got a nitrogen bottle out there for pressurizing AC system so we can find those leaks. Most of what we got out here is nitrogen anyway. So it doesn't matter if you got if you got a nitrogen leak, is that a problem? No, it is not.
I don't get why these nitrogen compounds emitted by your exhaust are supposed to be so harmful if nitrogen is 80% of the atmosphere.
Well, it actually isn't a problem except whenever you lock them together in peculiar compounds. It's like, carbon monoxide as opposed to carbon dioxide. Carbon monoxide is poison, carbon dioxide is not. So that just one molecule can make it, change it from being... Do you know what they do to make sugar into Splenda? They add a molecule of chlorine.
Chlorine.
Yeah. And it turns sugar into Splenda. It keeps your body from actually, keeps your body from processing it the way it does sugar. And that's the reason, that's the difference between Splenda and sugar.
Glucose.
So one little tiny molecule makes a difference in the way everything works.
Sure.
But poison, all those different oxygens, nitrous oxide compounds are poison. I mean, they're bad poison, so you don't want to, of course, you're not really putting enough of them out to where everybody that walks by the car can go, or nothing like that, but it just, over time, it causes
Knock
issues.
off major pain.
I mean, you can take a spoonful of arsenic and put it on your cereal every day for a while without killing yourself, just goes throughout your body,
Is that kind of like, you remember we were talking about the orange antifreeze? How it's got the same thing in it as something else?
Yeah, propylene glycol is in orange antifreeze. That doesn't mean you can drink orange antifreeze. But it does mean that propylene glycol, which happens to be in orange antifreeze, is also in some other stuff that's not harmful. You can drink, like that little Mio stuff, it's got propylene glycol in it, but it's not harmful. Like I say, I researched that, because I didn't want to drink that stuff. And they was actually saying they tried to find out that was poisoning by just feeding large amounts of it to rats and stuff. And they were just like, whee, no problem, He said the rats never even got sick, it didn't hurt them or anything. And so they said, well, they could use it for a sweetener, preservative, and all that kind of stuff. And it's in a lot of cough syrups and that kind of thing. But it's also an antifreeze, so the orange antifreeze has got other stuff in it besides that would probably put you out. They put other stuff in alcohol to make it poisonous. Rubbing alcohol, if you drink that, you will surely die. But, the alcohol that they put in your Jim Beam whiskey and all that, I don't really think that's particularly good for you either, although it, if you took a shot of it every night before you went to bed, you'd probably be a little healthier, but the thing about it is it leads to more and more and more and more, and after a while everybody's, El Drunko, I never have liked that stuff. I didn't like beer, I didn't like no kind of alcohol. It always tasted to me like if somebody handed me a drink somewhere that had something in it, I could know right away. It tastes like it's got paint thinner in it or something. I don't have a taste for it. Number 24. Anything that makes my tongue feel dead, when I put it in my mouth, I ain't got no use for it. Remote sensing is used in some states and involves shooting a beam of infrared light through the exhaust stream of a passing vehicle. Yeah, that is true. That is true. Remote sensing. And then finally, what is the state that establishes many of the standards for vehicle emissions that ultimately become used in many other areas of the country? Which state? Which state pretty much sets the standard?
Alabama.
California. But I will tell you this. What I was told at one of the Max convention things is that, listen here, this is important. Federal standards are beginning to be, in some areas, more stringent than California standards.
California is an old standard.
Yeah.